Snow fell heavily that Christmas Eve, blanketing the city in white silence. From the top floor of a glass skyscraper, Daniel Hart watched the streets below, the lights glowing like distant stars, families rushing home, couples laughing, children dragging sleds through the snow. But inside that office, everything was still. No laughter, no warmth. Just one man in a perfectly pressed suit, sitting beside a half-empty glass of scotch, staring at the framed photograph of a smiling woman and a little boy he had once called his family. The photo had yellowed over the years, but he couldn't bring himself to throw it away. That if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the miracles that sometimes find broken hearts when they least expect it, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. This story might just remind you that even the coldest winters can melt with a little love. For 8 years, Daniel had spent every Christmas the same way, alone in his penthouse, surrounded by luxury, but haunted by emptiness. Once the youngest and most visionary CEO in the city, he had built his empire from scratch after losing everything in a tragic accident that took his wife and son one icy Christmas night. That night had rewritten his life. The sound of twisting metal, the flashing ambulance lights, the cold that refused to leave his bones, it all stayed with him, like a ghost he could never silence. After that, he buried himself in work, convincing himself that success would fill the void. But no matter how high he climbed, the loneliness climbed with him. His company, Heart and Stone Industries, had become a symbol of power and prestige, but behind the closed doors of his lavish office, Daniel's heart was a graveyard of memories. His employees respected him but feared him. He never smiled, never attended parties, never celebrated anything. Christmas decorations were banned from his office. He said they distracted people, but the truth was they reminded him of everything he'd lost. That year, a snowstorm had forced the city into an early quiet. The streets emptied, the shops closed early, and Daniel found himself trapped in his office longer than usual. His driver had warned him not to travel in the blizzard, so he decided to walk home, just a few blocks through the storm. The wind bit at his face as he trudged through the snow, his breath coming in white clouds. When he reached his penthouse, the silence inside felt heavier than usual. He turned on the fireplace, poured himself another drink, and sat by the window, watching the snow fall endlessly. Then came a sound he hadn't heard in years, a knock at his door. At first, he ignored it, assuming it was a mistake. But the knocking came again, louder this time, urgent. With a frown, he stood up, opened the door, and froze. There, in the dim hallway light, stood a woman in a worn coat, her face pale from the cold, holding the hand of a little girl no older than 7. Both were shivering, snow clinging to their hair and clothes. The woman's voice trembled as she spoke, apologizing for disturbing him. Their car had broken down nearby, and all the nearby apartments were dark. She had seen the lights in his window and hoped to borrow a phone, or maybe just wait inside until the storm eased. Daniel hesitated. He had never been one to open his door to strangers, but something in the little girl's eyes, wide, innocent, filled with the kind of hope he'd forgotten existed, made him step aside. He told them to come in. The warmth of the fire hit them immediately, and the girl gasped softly, staring around the penthouse in awe. The mother introduced herself as Claire, and her daughter as Lily. They had been on their way to visit Claire's parents for Christmas, but had gotten lost in the storm. Daniel offered them blankets and hot cocoa, though his hands shook slightly as he did. He wasn't used to company. As they warmed up, Daniel found himself watching them quietly. Claire had that calm strength that came from struggle, the kind of woman who'd seen hard times but still found reasons to smile. Lily, meanwhile, was pure light, laughing softly as she wrapped herself in a blanket twice her size, sipping cocoa like it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. Daniel hadn't realized how much he missed the sound of laughter in his home until that moment. As the evening went on, the snow showed no signs of stopping, and Daniel insisted they stay the night. He prepared the guest room, something that hadn't been used in years. After tucking Lily into bed, Claire joined Daniel by the fire. They talked quietly at first, about small things, about work, about the weather. But soon, the walls began to crack. Claire shared that she was a single mother, struggling to make ends meet after losing her husband 3 years earlier. She worked 2 jobs to provide for Lily, and this trip was supposed to be their one happy escape of the year. Her eyes glistened when she spoke of how hard it was, how she worried about giving Lily the kind of life she deserved. Daniel listened, something he hadn't done in a long time. He found himself telling her about his own loss, the wife and son he couldn't save, the years of guilt that had frozen him inside. The fire burned low as they sat in silence afterward. Outside, the storm howled, but for the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel completely alone. There was something healing in the quiet presence of someone who understood pain without judgment. The next morning, Lily woke first. Daniel found her standing by the window, eyes wide as she looked at the snow-covered city. She asked him if he had a Christmas tree. When he said no, her face fell. "Everyone should have a tree," she said softly. He tried to explain that he didn't celebrate anymore, but she didn't seem to understand. A few minutes later, she disappeared into the kitchen and returned holding a small potted plant she'd found near the window. She decorated it with paper stars she cut from an old magazine and a ribbon from her mother's bag. "Now you have a Christmas tree," she said proudly. Something broke inside Daniel then. Not painfully, but gently, like ice melting under sunlight. That small act, that simple gesture of kindness, did something years of therapy and work couldn't. He smiled for the first time in nearly a decade. When the storm cleared, Daniel offered to drive them the rest of the way to Claire's parents' house. On the way, Lily sang Christmas songs in the back seat, her laughter filling the car. Claire thanked him for his kindness, but Daniel felt like he was the one who had been saved out a week later. After the holidays, he found himself missing the sound of their voices. The silence of his penthouse returned, heavier than before, but this time it hurt in a different way. It hurt because he had remembered what it felt like to care. He wanted to see them again. He didn't know how to explain it, but he needed to. So, one afternoon, he drove across the city to a small cafe Claire had mentioned she worked at. When she saw him walk in, surprise flashed across her face, followed by a smile that warmed the coldest corners of his heart. From that day, Daniel began visiting often. He helped Claire with her small business dreams, offering advice and quietly investing in her plans. He spent weekends with Lily, helping her with homework, teaching her how to build snowmen in the park, and laughing more than he had in years. Slowly, the walls around his heart crumbled. The man who once swore never to love again found himself drawn to the life he had thought he'd lost forever. Months passed, and the three of them grew inseparable. Daniel discovered that love doesn't always come in the way you expect. It sometimes knocks when you least want to open the door. The next Christmas, his penthouse looked nothing like the cold, empty place it once was. A tall Christmas tree stood in the corner, covered in lights and little paper stars, Lily's tradition. Claire was in the kitchen, laughing as she burned the cookies again, and Lily was singing carols by the fire. Daniel stood by the window, looking out at the city lights, his heart full. For the first time in nearly 10 years, he whispered, "Merry Christmas," and truly meant it. That night, he realized that the greatest gifts don't come wrapped in paper or ribbons. They come in the form of people who bring warmth to the coldest hearts. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep bringing real, emotional stories like this to life. Before you go, tell us in the comments, do you believe people deserve second chances at happiness? Because sometimes, all it takes is one knock at the door to change everything.